Okay. You guys can hear me, right? Everybody can hear? Yeah? Yeah. Okay, good. All right, so, yeah, welcome. I mean, okay, the people on screen maybe want to see us too. Maybe want to switch on the camera, so. Is it on? Slide it into camera. Okay, so yeah, thanks for coming in the nice LUKSO hub space on our staircase, the Tribüne. So yeah, we just had some pizza and drinks, and Federico will be talking a bit about the new standards. Maybe who is a deaf here? Like hands up. Okay, good. That's what we really want. The deafs. Okay, cool, awesome. Yeah, so yeah, it will be about. I mean, it will be about like standards on blockchain. So, okay, it doesn't matter, man. I can be cut off head, I mean, but yeah, I mean, long story short, a cat you can also zoom out easily. Yeah, so Federico, want to come in here?
Yeah, sure.
Cat, maybe you want to zoom out so that we can be seen here.
It's smaller.
So he doesn't need to squeeze into the little window. So Federico here. Now we can stand, okay.
I'm so short.
Yeah, so Federico will be presenting. Federico is a distinguished professor, actually a professor. And we'll be talking about our standards. I mean, do you want to give a little intro about LUKSO as well? Or should I do that before?
No, you can do it if you want.
Okay. So who doesn't know? LUKSO is an EVM blockchain, started in 2023. On a blockchain level, it's Ethereum. But the special thing here is that we invented basically a whole new standards track. And if you look at Ethereum, the standards track is ERC, right? That every standards come from. I proposed that name 2015, and I proposed the first smart contract standard, and we have a light thing going on here, and pretty much, yeah, our lights do what they want sometimes. We have to live with that. Light goes. And basically, the problem with that is we have a lot of standards. We have only 5 proper adopted standards, actually 1, right? ERC20, and then ERC721 as the second one. And then you have 1155, 43371 wants to be adopted, and then a lot of others. The biggest problem that the space has is that everybody who's making a new standard either makes this because of self-proliferation of their project, or if they're building a new cool standard protocol, it's always tries to be backwards compatible, because if you're not backwards compatible, you don't get adoption and the whole thing doesn't work. The problem is this is the slowest path to evolution of really making things proper. So what we did here is actually step 1, step out. Think about what are the foundational building blocks we need and how can we make sure that they work together. Build them from scratch, with the learnings obviously of the past, and created a new set of standards that we call LUKSO standard proposals. There are also standards that are obviously completely valid for every other EVM chain, but LUKSO basically functions as a frontier experimentation space to build around these new standards. And what could we do on blockchain if we would have just new standards that are made to work well together and give us a lot more options and functionality? Right, that's the kind of idea. And sometimes it does require this novel approach of going outside, on a clean slate, doing it with the learnings of the past, because when we started the first ERC standards, there was no learning of the past because there was no past, And now with the learnings of the past, how can we do the right foundations? And that allowed us to build a smart contract account system that is very comprehensive with permission systems and reactability, and make sure that also we have new token standards that work well with these profiles, accounts, and different future protocols. Yeah, and more will be explained by Federico. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, to be here. It's amazing.
Can you disconnect to the StreamYard again real quick? I think when you
I see. Okay. Because we change. Okay.
Yeah. We want slides.
Do you need my microphone?
No.
To share? Okay.
No, just mute yourself and you put the slides.
Okay. I see. Okay. Super. Well, thank you everyone to be here. That's amazing. And today we'll talk about how new token standards are different from ERC20 and ERC721. And I think who is a developer already knows this standard.
I think you're not that in StreamYard.
You think so?
You need to StreamYard, and that's when we get the slides.
I'm inside the StreamYard.
Yeah, he is.
Because for this, okay. Let me share.
Yeah, share screen. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's the one.
Okay. So if you are a developer, probably know already these two standards. For the other one, I will try to help you to have a better understanding of the difference of RC and LSP. But before to start, let me share with you the goals of this presentation, where the first one is to have a new vision of what Web3 could be, and then explore together LUKSO standard, and maybe at the end to encourage you to be a little more creative. So I think that everybody knows Fabian, co-founder of LUKSO, co-author of ERC20, that is the most used standard on blockchain. Actually, ERC725, Ethereum Identity Standard, and IP1193. And also LUKSO, that is an AVM-based blockchain. That means that we support already all standard tools that are already working on Ethereum. It's a layer 1 and proof of stake. So before to dive into LUKSO standard, I think that we have to understand the current Web3 ecosystem and how it works. And to understand it properly, I want to pick two different points of view. The first one is the user one. And for users, I mean people like your dad or your friends. So normal users, not dev people. And the other one is the point of view of companies and mostly software houses, so companies that build business and software on top of the blockchain. And if we start with companies, and let me share some data, we can see something like this. We can see that during the 2024, we have around 25 million active wallets on the Web3, and most of the users are spread across DeFi and games. I think that this is really interesting because it's strange how first of all, other area they don't have impact on the ecosystem apparently. And also, we can see that there are very few business models built on top of the Web3. So why? I mean, especially, let's speak, for example, the social area. Why do we have so few users? If we compare to Web2, we have something like this. 25 million total active users on Web3, and Web2, just on Facebook, we have 3 billion. On Instagram, 2 billion, and so on. I mean, there is a huge gap. So maybe to understand what's going on and why it's so hard to build a new business model and to attract new users, let's shift on the user perspective. So if we compare how users interact on Web2 and on Web3, we have totally different experience. And usually users have to take care of two things when they want to play with a software or a website or whatever. The first thing is the sign-up process. So on the Web 2, everybody has experience. We have something like this. It's a form that you went through to log in. You insert your password, choose your mail, and then confirm. And that's you repeat this process for every website. On the Web 3, fortunately, it's just one time process that we have to do, but there are many. And they are techy and complex. So it's easy to understand why users feel stuck here. I don't want to go through because we have to choose a crypto wallet, for example, add a browser extension, choose a password. I think that everybody knows the pain of this process. And if we think to interact on Web 2 with something like this, on Web 2 it's really easy. You have to follow the helper and then play around. Straightforward. On the Web 3, if we think just to use the testnet, we have so many processes because we have to learn what the gas is, for example, how to set up the testnet, how to find the faucet, and then maybe at the end we can execute the transaction. And that's just for the testnet. Because if we think to use a mainnet, we have to go through all the DEX and checks process to buy the token, do the KYC, and then maybe again execute a transaction. Too many processes from my dad, for example. There is no way that he went through all this stuff. So why don't we focus just on what users can do? That could be just install an easy application or sign up like already we do on Web 2, buy a normal data plan, post stuff on social media. But the question is why there is this big gap and difference on the technological side from Web 2 and Web 3. And I think it's a matter of context and needs. And for context and needs, I mean that we started in 2015 around, Fabian knows, probably, where we had few blockchains at that point. I mean, everything was a proof of concept. We have just to move our first steps in the ecosystem and show that there is a meaning to use blockchain and that we want to build, hopefully, something different from Web 2, so create the first showcases. But now the situation is totally different. We have a new context where we have many blockchains in the ecosystem. We have use cases. I would see we have 25 million users that are few, but still we have adoption. But at the same time, we want to build new powerful application, increasing transparency, security, and efficiency, and build proper social, a proper social experience. And my feelings, since I work in this area, is that we are working on an old context, and we are trying to reach our new needs. So to visualize this concept, let me do an example. Let's say that as human at one point, we want to move faster than walking or running. So the first thing that is logical is to use animals. That's why we invented the horse-drawn carriage. But what happens if we want to go faster? Well, what we are doing actually on blockchain is just increasing the number of horses. Well, that's, of course, has some limitation. It doesn't work properly. What we have to do, maybe, is to use a new approach and a different point of view. Of course, maybe it's harder in the first time, but it's the actual solution that brings innovation. And in this way, we can reach a new level. So what we are trying to do is to build a new model where user experience and creativity are not limited by technical constraints. What does it mean? Well, basically means that we want to reduce the tech limitations, create a true interoperability in the whole ecosystem. In this way, we can unlock creativity, and that means also to build new business model. and we can have a properly maybe user experience and encourage a collaborative innovation. So that's why we are here today, to propose LUKSO standard proposal that has to be something different. And we need to understand what we are doing. So let's start to understand what is a standard. Maybe somebody wants to guess, if it's a developer. What's for you is a standard? I mean, there are no wrong answers.
Like a function with a defined set of inputs and outputs?
Yes, exactly. In very easy word, we can describe a standard in this way. So that it's a set of rules that we can use to create a smooth experience with others, players in the ecosystem. And it's hard to understand what a standard is in the digital world for people that are not techie. But for a normal use case, we can think about the energy plug. In Europe, many countries has different standards for energy plug. Like in Germany, we have the F1, in Italy, the L1. So if you are a company in Italy, your appliance will support the L standard and not the F1. It's logical. And that's exactly what is happening today in the blockchain. The problem is the appliance that I build in Italy will never work in the other country. There is no communication. So we can see a scenario very similar to this one. So what we want to build is more something like this. An universal standard that supports all the other ones, doesn't matter which one you are using, but is able to communicate, to interact, okay? And to build an ecosystem that represents this idea, we are here to propose many standards, as you can see. We have LSP0 for account, LSP1 for universal receiver. We have LSP6 key manager. So today we are not going through all the standards because they are too much. But we are focused on LSP7 and LSP8 that are the standards that define digital assets. But before to move on, let me introduce the LSP0. Because LSP0 is one of the core standards, I will say, on LUKSO, and it's very special because it defines the account standard and then what we call universal profile. We will see it later. And so how can I imagine what's an account on blockchain? Well, let's think an account like an digitalization of the representation of myself. Okay, it's kind of tricky. But if I have to think myself in the digital world, for sure, it's something that is customizable. That's why we have LSP3. But at the same time, can learn along the way new things. That's why we have LSP17. And also that can interact with the item that I found in the ecosystem. That's why we have LSP1. So we can see that there are two macro areas that cooperate, and one is for metadata, mainly, a really key point on our standard, and for the function in the what we call interactivity. And it's on blockchain, so I want to be the owner, hopefully, of this account. I want to have the key to choose which items I want to interact, if I want to provide access to some devices or not. And at the end, everything has to look like with something that I has already experienced. So maybe just as account on the Web 2, but we already seen that under the hood there is much more. So something like this, something custom with an icon, images, description, name, and unique address, tags, and links, and much, much more. We will see later. So now that we have understood the concept of account, hopefully, what digital assets are. Well, in easy word, and sorry, developers, we can describe a digital asset as a representation of what we have in the real world, but on blockchain. And today, to get along with this process, the main standards are ERC20 and ERC721. So why we are here to propose LSP7 and LSP8 if we already have some standards that work? Well, because these standards have some kind of limitation. For example, on ERC20, you can't store or manage metadata. LSP721, there is a really lack of metadata, and there is no reactivity on chain, and there is a lack of upgradeability. So if you deploy, you create a smart contract on the blockchain with the standard, it's really, if not impossible, to extend their functionality after the deploy. And there is a limited functionality and transfer issue. With LSP7 and LSP8, first of all, the metadata are unlimited. Why this is important? Because if they have to be a representation of item in the real world, item could be everything. They could have so many custom data, like I can have black jeans or blue jeans or t-shirts, whatever. So they have to be custom and with an unlimited metadata. We solve the reactivity that now it's also on-chain, both for sender and receiver, and of course also off-chain. We incremented the upgradeability, we'll see later, and we have advancing functionalities and secure transfer. That is, it's easier with this point to build a proper user experience. So how LSP7 and LSP8 looks like, we can see something like this. So as you can see, there are already different concepts in LSP7 itself and LSP8 itself. But for now, let's focus just on the difference between LSP7 and LSP8. The key one is that LSP8 introduced the concept of ID. For everybody that doesn't know what an ID is an unique identifier. So that means that every time that I create something on the LSP8, it has an ID that make it unique from all the others. On LSP8, we don't have this concept. So let's start with LSP8 that is easier to understand. On LSP8, we can see that it's kind of like that we have two different behavior. So to understand this behavior, let's go through the code. This is a basic code for LSP7, mintable. And there are some variables that are really easy to understand, like token name is the variables that we set up to provide a name to our LSP7, or token symbol, same for the symbols. Address, token contract owner is the address of the owner that we provide to the smart contract. And then we have LSP4 token type, and the last one is a Boolean called is non-divisible. If we start with LSP4 token type, basically we use LSP4 token type to provide two different behavior of the metadata of the LSP7. So in this case, we can provide two value, 0 and 1. If these variables is 0, our metadata of our LSP7 will act more like a token. If it's 1, it will act more like a multi-unit NFT that basically is act like an NFT but can own more units. Like in this example, in the first case, I own 1, but in the second case, I own 2. If it's not clear, we can understand it better with some use case. When we have token behavior, we can think about currency, first of all, it's the easier to understand, or fan token, or loyalty point. When we have an NFT behavior, if we want to think about something that we have already experienced, we can think of ticket, pass, and certificates. Okay? So now that this concept is clear, the last variable that speak for itself, basically. It's a Boolean, so it can just be true or false. And when it's true, that means that our token is not fractionable. You can just own on transfer integers. And if it's false, I can own on transfer fraction of it. If we see last example, like this account own 9.62 flat Wi-Fi hat. Easy to understand, I think, this concept. On the LSP8 side, we can always see two different concepts. And to understand it better, we have always go through the code. So we can always see variables for name and symbols and the address of the contract owner. And always we have LSP4 token type that now we have some kind of idea on does it work. And then at the end we have LSP4 token ID format. So let's start always with LSP4 token type that in this case can only have always two value, 1 and 2. With value 1, we have something that acts more like an unique NFT. That means that every time that I create a new item on this smart contract, it will be associated to an unique identifier. If we set up this value as 2, we can have a behavior like a collection. That means that inside my LSP8, every time that I have an ID, the item that I store inside are unique, but they are also independent. That means they could have their own logic, their own functionalities, and also their own metadata. The last variables means how do we want show or means use our IDs, because it could have many values. If we provide the 0 value to these variables, our IDs will be numbers, 1 string, 2 address, 3 bytes, and 4 hash. Sorry, for the 2 address, yeah, right. So let's see some example. When we have 0, we have something like this. The ID, you can see the ID after owns, after the hashtag. In this case, is a number, 695. If it's 1, we have a string, like in this case, silver. And with 2, we have address, like the address of a smart contract. To summarize, let's take a look to this grid. So for LSP7 with LSP4 token type 0, we have something that could be divisible or not. It depends on the last variable. It's non-divisible, as we saw, and act more like a token. With LSP7 and LSP4 as 1, we have something that is non-divisible and act more like a multi-unit NFT. LSP8 with LSP4 token type as 1, something non-divisible, and then unique NFT. And then the last one with LSP4 token type with value 2, something non-divisible and act more like a collection. Yeah?
With the two different, like LSP8 and LSP7, the both NFT use cases?
Yeah. So let's pick the LSP8. LSP8 introduced IDs. That means that every time that you mint a new item on that LSP8, let's say that the first item has the ID 0, and the number is always 1 NFT. So you mint another ID that has value 2, and there is another item. Then another ID with value 3, and there is another item. On LSP7, you have always the same smart contract. There is no IDs. It acts like an NFTs, and you can own more than one. So it's like a ticket. You can have one ticket, but you can have also 2, 3, 4, whatever. Okay. Very nice. Okay. Yeah?
Maybe I'm just adding something to this
Yes,
to answer
sure.
the question. So basically, in LSP7 and LSP8, the difference between if you make them as an NFT, in one you have unique IDs per item that you own. In the other, you just own a unit. And why is it, for example, sensible? Number one, if you have a digital sword, right? You don't need to necessarily know if you have this digital sword or that digital sword with this ID or that ID, because it's all the same digital sword, and I just own a unit, right? So I don't need to. I just need to have a mount, and I don't need to have an actual ID. And when you do this as an LSP7, it's cheaper to transfer. It's less computation. It's less complex. Yeah. But if you would do an LSP8, then you get a unique ID, but it's also more complex to transfer. It costs more money to, more gas to transfer. So it's more about choosing it based on what's like how complicated is like. It's based on the use case, right? I mean, like, and LSP7 is like ERC20, right? And on Ethereum, people would say, oh, yeah, non-fungible token means non-fungible. But what it really means is like this are assets that we treat as kind of unique, where you own, like a digital sword, for example, it's a unique asset. It's not necessarily a currency, but it could be also currency, because if there's 100 swords, you can make a currency out of it. But if you use this, if we set this token type, one basically tells to the interface that you should treat this as an NFT rather than as a token.
Yeah, also, for example, if helps you to visualize, if you use an LSP8 and you have different IDs, you can store different metadata for every ID. Okay.
That wouldn't be possible with the LSP7.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. So, about metadata, we have seen lots of stuff here. We have seen also the code, but still we haven't seen how metadata works, because one of the key points that we said is that we can store unlimited metadata. So let's talk about metadata, how it works. So let's say that, let's start that for metadata, I means almost whatever you want. I means icons, I means images, I mean properties, I mean links, tags, attributes, documents, videos, GIFs, whatever you want. And to understand how these standards are different from ERC, let's start with this basic concept. Let's visualize our LSP7 like a union of different pieces, where each piece is a smart contract with its own purpose. Like we have, for example, LSP1, Universal Receiver, LSP17, and of course, we have LSP4. LSP4 is the one that manages metadata and works in synergy with LSP7 or LSP8 to manage them. Maybe like this, it's easier to visualize. So we have already seen something. We have already seen LSP4 in action before. Like, let's pick up very basic example of my LSP7, my custom token that everybody deploy on the blockchain the first time. As we can see, we have an icon there. But how can I see all the other metadata that are stored on LSP4? Well, we can go a little bit deeper, and we can see something like this. We have an icon, of course, name and symbol. We have a description. We have more images, in this case 3, but they could be 4, 5, 1,000. Attributes, creators, links, and so on. For the developers, our LSP4 looks like something like this. JSON file, okay, with a verification area and an URL that point an object. And if we go inside this object, we will see something like this. And basically, this is what you see on our front end. So it could be whatever, everything that you want. You can store many data. If this is the basic example, what happened with LSP8 collection? That we said every item in the LSP8 collection is unique, but could be also it could have its own functionality, logic, and metadata. So on the top here, we can see the metadata of my LSP8 collection, of my smart contract. And on the bottom, we can see all the items stored in the LSP8, that in this case are smart contracts, independent smart contracts. And if we go inside one of the items, we see always their metadata. So icons, description, attributes, and so on. Is it clear? Okay, let's move on. So after metadata, we have worked a lot on the reactivity. And yeah. Yeah.
That's one important piece that I want to add here. Like linking a JSON file where you write whatever, like that's obviously one thing you can do. But each of these token contracts has ERC721Y, and that's a standard where you can store arbitrary keys and values. So you can actually add a lot of extra smart contract readable metadata into a token contract or into the profile. The profile is the same thing. And that's actually where it gets really powerful, because you can add information into your token contract that's relevant for a protocol that this token will interact with. It could be not just the links to the JSON file, right? That's one thing that's off-chain, but it could also be information like who's the creator. For example, the creator array that you were seeing in this picture is actually an array written in the metadata that any smart contract can read. So a smart contract can actually read who is the creator, and the profile itself will point back to the NFT. So you have a two-way on-chain verification that an NFT was created by a certain author. That could allow you to build a protocol that, for example, only allows NFTs from a certain amount of people or a certain set of creators, or creators that belong to a certain collective or whatever, because you have on-chain verifiability of who created the thing. And it's a two-way verification. That's possible through this metadata you can add, like arbitrary metadata can be added. And even down the road, when you have deployed your token already, and then a new protocol comes out that needs some information at the token contract, you can still add that metadata later down the road as well. So your token could be even useful down the road, if that makes sense. I mean, just high level, I said.
No, that's helpful, to be honest. Okay, let's talk about reactivity. And for reactivity, we can understand reactivity with the interoperability that we have in the ecosystem. And we see in the Web3, apparently there is a lack of interoperability between the app and smart contract. So how we get to this point, and how can we understand how our standard works also for non-tech people? Well, let's imagine to be in a room with other people, like right now. Easy. And what a match. And everyone talks some languages, so it's easy to understand that you can understand me if we spoke the same language. But if we speak different language, this communication is not possible. That's actually what happens on the blockchain. But I mean, now we propose LSP1 that works like an universal translator from all the other standards. In this way, you can always create communication and reactivity on the blockchain on all the apps and everyone that are involved in the ecosystem. Yeah.
Within LSPs, or also can?
Now I can show you. It's LSP1. Yeah, it's an LSP1. It's a standard, and you attach this standard, for example, to your LSP7.
Okay, and then also ERCs can talk to LSPs?
Now I can show you. Yeah, now I'm coming there. So that's maybe the answer to your question. Actually, what we see is something like this. Every standard have to implement its own function to interact, to have a kind of reactivity with the same standard. So in this case, ERC721 will talk with other smart contract that implements ERC721, but can talk with ERC6700. And we want to move from something like this, That means that you just need to have LSP1 on your smart contract, if I have to respond to your questions, to interact to all the other smart contracts that support LSP1. Okay.
But then does, for example, ERC20 support LSP1?
It could, but not natively. You have to add it. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, to the question. So what it does is, in a summary, is on because all the other standards were not really developed in concert, you have exactly the problem that ERC20 is not informing receivers. ERC721 is informing receivers if you call the safe transfer function. If you call the normal transfer function on ERC721, it does not inform the receiving smart contract. So the problem is, if receiving smart contracts of tokens, for example, are not informed, then you cannot automatically react. So you cannot, for example, say, okay, as an account, I don't want to receive tokens, so I will reject it. Or if I'm receiving a token, I want to automate something. So actually, the first standard, that's why it's called LSP1, was the universal receiver to solve that main problem. How can we have protocols interacting with each other? Because all protocols currently, there's no universal way to interact or notify another smart contract. And that's what this does. It's a universal way to notify other smart contracts so that these other smart contracts can build logic to react. And that's specifically important, for example, for your profile. Your profile has the universal receiver built in. Every token calls always the universal receiver when you send it. That means every asset will inform your profile, and you could automate things based on that. You can extend the functionality of your profile and react in a certain way. And so now, if you build within LUKSO, where everybody is using LSP7 and LSP8, and everybody has a universal profile, you can be sure whatever you're building is pretty much universally reactable, right? You can build a protocol that actually makes use of this universal reactability. And when you're building on a chain where ERC20 is dominant, which is every other chain, you will never have that. You can never build a protocol where reactability is an important part of your protocol, because not a single account can be informed. Not a single account can react in any way automatically, because there's no universal function. And in fact, because 721 has it, 777, the token standard, has it. 223, the token standard, was proposing it as well. But it was never generally adopted, meaning you just don't have any kind of smart contracts that have a universal receiver function. You don't have any tokens that really reliably do that, except 721, but only on the safe transfer function call, which most people don't call because they rather call the ones which they know go through, so they call the normal transfer function call. So you never can rely on any of that stuff. And that's the benefit, or that's the beauty also when you're building in a new ecosystem where you have all of these standards from scratch that have this built in. You can now build systems that literally use this new type of functionality that you could never even dream of on an existing chain. There's just no way, because you cannot convince everybody to upgrade to a universal account tomorrow and everybody changing their tokens, which they can't even do, right? Even if they wanted to. So that's also the approach of the LSPs, is to really make these standards that are built as comprehensive, like as holistic set of things that are working together holistically. So you not only benefit from upgraded metadata in the token, but you also benefit from the fact that every token or NFT will inform always receiving contracts, whatever protocol you can build now and think of. Yeah, and also all the profiles do the same thing. They can be receiving, they can be informed, and can automatically react in a way. So fun things, for example, we have a follower standard. The follower, when you follow someone in the follower smart contract, it informs the profile. So your profile could do something based on being followed, right? Give a token back, or let you become a part of a club, or whatever, like these kind of things are now possible, and they're currently not thinkable because nobody really thought about those interconnecting standards. Because in an ecosystem where everybody just built an isolated new piece, like an interconnected standard is the thing that you get definitely no adoption. You would have to literally convince so many parties to do that it's impossible. That's exactly why this is only possible if you do things from scratch, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay.
So just as a basic example, when I'm doing the transfer, when I'm calling the transfer function on the ERC20 contract, like there's going to be only a single event transfer that's being emitted like in the smart contract. Like in case of LSP, I'm having two events, the one on the version ERC20 on the smart contract of the receiver, and that's essentially the difference.
So I mean, just to repeat that the audio is also understood. So you're saying that like on, or your question is like on ERC20 you have the transfer event being fired, but on LUKSO you have the transfer event being fired on the event, and you actually have the universal receiver event fired on the universal profile smart contract of the receiving profile.
So it's actually two events.
Yeah.
On the sender and on the receiver.
Yeah, actually the token will actually inform the sending profile or the sending account and the receiving account. So I could even automate things based on when tokens leave my wallet. Funny enough. So.
And that is also the token contract emit the transfer event, and then the token contract inform the sender, which emit an event, but it has been notified, and then the token contract inform the recipient, which also recipient emit an event if it's a smart contract.
Yeah, by inform you mean like the
informing as with a function. If sender and recipient in the smart contract, there is a function being called sender contract and recipient.
Okay, maybe because so that we also have this in recording, I always throw the mic to the person who wants to say something. Just need to catch it, okay? But yeah, we can go. Does this answer the question?
yeah, to a certain extent. I actually have another one.
Okay, but then they have to catch the mic first.
All right.
Okay. I hope it's working. Let's say I've built a protocol on Ethereum, and I'm just building on top of like simple primitives like ERC20 or 721, and I want to be extending it like with the power of LSPs. Is it possible that I can leverage cross-chain like messages to somehow implement your standards, or should I be completely moving to LUKSO in order to achieve the things that I want to achieve?
So, I mean, you could take all of those standards and deploy them on any EVM chain. So you can deploy an LSP7 token on Ethereum, no problem. But then, because no account is having a universal receiver function, you will miss out on that, right? Like no account will be able to react, so you can't even think of building anything in that direction. There is an ERC2. I mean, you have also a problem that most of the wallets wouldn't really natively support it. There's actually an ERC20 compatible version of LSP7. We actually took that down on LUKSO because if you're trying to satisfy like two different places, then number one, it's more expensive. It's potentially more insecure to deploy, and also you get these people, then they will clinch onto the old. And so it is actually, if you want to build with these new functionalities, the only place is to build on LUKSO, because there you know not only every user will have a universal receiver function, but every user is also a nice profile that will make your app a lot cooler looking. Every user by default will have a sophisticated smart contract account that has plenty of new functionalities. While on Ethereum, you get a lot of dumb private keys. At best, you get a smart contract account that currently are multi-sigs, right? And maybe if you're advanced, you get one of these more, like 0.1% of your users might have a more advanced smart contract account, but then the standard right now is the modular account standard. That means you can't even count on anything because you don't know which modules. None of these modules are properly spread yet or adopted widely, so you can't even rely on any of those. So actually, you always have to literally count with the dump account as being the default. That means anything you build that requires a smarter account would literally be impossible, right? If that makes sense. So yes, if you want to build something more sophisticated and you want automations, all of the things, LUKSO is the only environment that would make sense. Because you will have this whole, everybody's using LSP7, everybody having a profile that gives you this better, more rich, developer possibilities, let's call it like that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. But basically, that's exactly, that's a really good question. When we want to move from something like this, I mean, the experience of MetaMask, when you have to import tokens manually, because MetaMask can't react directly to the import of the tokens, to something that is automatic. Okay, so basically the app can react automatically
on what's going on the blockchain. Okay, that's the meaning of what we are doing. So, and of course, every player on the blockchain ecosystem can benefit of these standards. So, like profiles, DApp, or DAO. Okay, make sense? Okay. So, let's talk about also upgradeability. So, as a developer, you know that when you deploy smart contracts, it's really hard to extend functionalities. You have to do a really huge workaround to do it. And what we want to do, basically, is create a flexible way and easy way to do it. That's why we propose ERC17 that allows you to extend the logic of your smart contract. And if you want to see a little bit deeper how it works, we can imagine, we cannot imagine, it's a system like this, where we have our smart contract that support ERC17 that we call extendable contract with its own logic. And then we have, if we want to extend the logic after the deployment of the extendable one, we deploy some contract that we call, in this case, extension contract with new function or new logic. And when the users, well, let's say that the user the first time call a function of the extendable smart contract, the behavior is the normal one. But if the users wants to call a function that is on the extension contract, it will interact with the extendable one, and it will redirect immediately to the extension contract. Same for the function B. On another perspective, yeah?
I just want to add to a bit of a clarifying question. So why is that relevant? Because obviously you can make a fully upgradable smart contract just by using a minimal proxy on Ethereum, right? Why is that? What's the point here? The point here is to make smart contracts upgradable without changing its core logic.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if you have a token contract and this token contract would be upgradable, that's called a rug pull. You know, anybody just upgrades the contract to send all the money to me function, and you have rug pulled everybody. So LSP 7 and 8 have this contract extension, which means you can add new functions that are external contracts. They don't use delegate call, they use call, so you can't override internal behavior, and means you can add new functions to the token without changing the core behavior. So you can know that your token is not going to be rug pulled just because someone added a new function here. That's the real deal why we're doing this. And we make it the safe way, let's call it like that, right? That's why it doesn't use delegate call. I mean, it has some limitations, obviously, of what you could potentially add. But because we have this whole key manager and other things, you can literally even make, real extensions. I mean, one thing, for example, would be a buyable NFT standard. You could make a standard that adds the buy and the sell function directly to a token. And how could you extend this? But just making a buy function that points to an order book contract, a sell function that points to an order book contract. You authorize the order book contract to be able to move some of the balances, and now you have a full DEX on a token contract itself, if you will, right? Without that, you had to change the core logic, and maybe that token was already deployed 2 years ago, but now you just add it later. So that's the kind of stuff that becomes possible now, extending functionality down the road. I mean, with some limitations, while keeping it safe and the core safe. Right?
Exactly. So another point of view, we can say something like this, where you can add function, add more logic to your smart contract that can evolve and basically have a different behavior along the way. Flip coin, yeah. That's in the documentation. Okay, and then let's see together like an user experience. Like for example, here we have an account connected to our universal everything. And here we can see with this button that connects to the app, and now interact with it. So browser section pop up, and we can see there are the metadata of the account. We have a Gaslex experience. Maybe I will do another round. I will stop it in a second. I want to go this through together. Okay.
Space.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a user that wants to execute a transaction, and the browser extension pop up, and here we can see the metadata of our universal profile, and we have a gasless experience. So we are using, in this case, a relayer on the mainnet, and you have a monthly fee gas that you can use every month. So we can see the total amount of gas, the gas that we have already used, and the gas that we need to spend just for this transaction. But that means that the users doesn't need to own tokens to interact with the app, okay? And he's transferring one LUKS to the receiver. The long click button, if you have to long click button to confirm the transaction, so you're sure that it's not a misclick. And then the transaction go through, and we can see the LUKS under the app. And here, now we can see another app that it's a multiplayer game when two universal profiles can interact together. Okay, so we have, now we can understand that we have a different approach to the Web3 with a different user experience. We have unlimited metadata that can create a really custom also experience. That it's a really key point of what we are doing. And we see the interoperability, how is different, and also the upgradeability. Thank you to be here. Arigato. Easy. Also, thank you to Jean to explain me everything. Okay, cool.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe it's now a good time to answer some questions.
Yeah.
If you have more questions, so we can. Maybe I can also sit here. We can make a little question answering. We have also Jean here.
Yeah.
Sean is actually the person who have been building most of the implementations actually since many years. Yeah, and yeah, you can sit here. And then we have to look. I know this would be for the audience, and we would use this mic then. But yeah, anybody has a question? Yeah, okay, here. No, just give this mic around.
Yeah, my question is in terms of interchangeability and interoperability between, let's say, the LUKSO ecosystem and the existing ecosystem. Like, there's already big NFT collections, all based on the on Ethereum blockchain, basically. And yeah, it's a general question in which way those will be able to to interchange them. Like, for example, being able to view and display NFT collections on other platforms that are based on, let's say, the old standards, and also in the other way around, is it possible to view NFTs from the old ecosystem within LUKSO platforms like this?
The answer, I mean, there's two ways to that. The answer is universal everything, for example, as a front end to show a profile and then show whatever the profile has, and then having mini apps related to your profile. I mean, currently that's all sitting on LUKSO, the mini apps that you see. But actually, the universal profile is built in such a way that you can cross-deploy this across multiple chains on the same address. And then you could even interact with mini apps that are sitting on, Base, Ethereum, or wherever else. So you could actually make this so that you can make it cross-chain. So your profile can be cross-chain, if you will, and interact with assets on any chain. Obviously, if you want to interact with smart contracts on LUKSO, you need to bridge things over, right? And there's a bridge that Jean is working on, and once there's a bridge, then you can technically bridge things over once we create routes for that. But it's always the question, when you think about a normal user, because we're all in this bubble. I mean, I don't know how how long you guys been in the Web3 bubble, but we're all in this bubble, and and once you dive deep, it's all about like, this chain and that chain and bridging around and having my multi-chain wallet, blah blah blah. But like a normal person doesn't even get that at all. Like it's really, really far out to even understand different kind of blockchains. They will go to the places where they can do something that's useful to them. And ideally, they don't want to even think about which chain it's sitting on. The chain which it's sitting on is important for the developer because maybe he wants to build something novel. And currently, the ecosystem ideas that we get within the current standard set is, I guess, we reach kind of like the roof of possibilities, right? And we really just extended the ERC20's experimentation, let's call it like that. But if we add a lot more new building blocks, make sure they all work together, now our possibility range expands by like 1,000x what can be built, right? Just like automations and reactability or get a token based on a follower on, like even far beyond just tokens, right? And that's what these new standards allow. So if you want a profile that like can interact with this new stuff, you want to build on LUKSO. If you want to have a profile that can interact with new stuff, if you want to interact with this old stuff, I mean, it's already cross-chain compatible. We would need to support that into our controller apps for profiles, which we do to some degree already, but we eventually will do that properly. The reason why we haven't done that yet is because that opens up another UX bucket, that needs to be done right. Otherwise, people get confused and make mistakes. And so we want to take the time to do this at the right time in the right way. But yeah, you could technically hold assets and interact with DApps on pretty much any EVM chain that we deploy the factory contracts to, and that's it. Or anyone could deploy them to, and the controller apps then work with them. But it's confusing to people, right? That's I think the bigger problem. And I would rather like to see to experiment on the new possibilities, the new direction, the new automations. And you can still hold your assets on your wallets, another chain. You could. There's even a standard that we were thinking about, like a standard where you can attach to your profile wallets that you hold on other chains, verified wallets with a signed message that prove that you control the profile and you control the wallets. And then this could be your wallets that you use on Solana, wherever, any kind of other chain, right? Because does there necessarily need to be on the profile? Not really. I mean, would make it nice, convenient, but it's not super important. If that makes sense, I guess.
Yes, yeah, makes absolute sense. My, let's say, concern would be more that the new standards, they offer much more flexibility, and it's just the next level, but that the network effects of the existing ecosystem is stronger, or that basically this is hard to compete in a way where there's already such a big ecosystem. And that's where my question is coming from, where if there's a way to bridge the assets or to have some kind of interoperability.
I mean, the fact is that LUKSO, it's EVM. It's exactly like Ethereum. There's nothing that is different on this level. So you could deploy ERC20s. But the big problem with that is that you have application already on LUKSO that are leveraging the ERC721 standard. And the fact is, although for project, it's easier to port the protocol that use ERC20 to LUKSO by just keeping ERC20, that doesn't scale because that costs a lot of money for a DApp to listen for many events, the more user there is to keep track of all the balances. And and it's exactly how at the moment it's working in the whole ecosystem, is by having infrastructure like server that just keep looking for like this transfer event that he mentioned to keep track of everyone's balances. So the more user you have, the more you have to process data of a transfer event and then updating these tracking of balances of user. While with LSP7 here you saw in his example, when you notify the sender of the recipient, you have assets that are registered and deregistered in the smart contract. So in the end, it's like much more scalable. And on top of that, you have all the feature of a standard.
I was meaning more about community user scaling, not so much like
Right.
functionality scaling.
Right.
So
Right.
maybe I can answer to that. So community scaling, you're right. If you have a new ecosystem, you always have the hard time to gain traction. That's true. But at the same time, if you have a certain thing that you can do in a new environment that you can't do anywhere else, and it really makes sense, and people start using it, then like people will start to go there, and they will start to use this, and then this is the network effect of the new. Same like Bitcoin.
In theory, yes.
Yeah, I mean,
like in practice, it does happen, yes, but it also happens that there's a better technology that is way superior, but it still doesn't, in the end, gets adopted because there's something else that is already just everyone's using it already. So
if you can do
why do we
if you
switch?
can do the same things with it, yes. But if you can do something only with that new technology, then likely the new technology, if it's better or worse, will get some adoption. And there's a lot of the same, like JavaScript or whatever. You have like a lot of cool, but they do the same thing that the old shitty JavaScript can do too, right? That new super coding, like there's barely something that you can only do there. And when there's something, then actually sometimes they do get adoption. So in our case, it's exactly the education around the standards that will make the difference. And this was a very high-level introduction, just to showcase different kind of possibilities that are possible. But on the end, like I think the moment you have the first protocol that makes use of this auto-reactivity of accounts or the auto-reactivity on assets to whatever protocol you have, that's when you are out of luck on an old chain, because no asset can do it. No account has a generic reactability function. Or when there's a protocol where you need accounts to store information that your protocol needs to automatically on-chain read from different profiles it interacts with, you can't do it on any other current chain because there's no accounts standard on any other chains that has that functionality. While on LUKSO, you get a whole user group of 20,000, 30,000 profiles currently that have that, and it will only get more, right? So I think that's where then the tipping points come, when we can make this. On the one hand, it's like we want to make a very beautiful user experience, and that's on to us to build apps. And then the other hand, it's for developers to discover that this is an ecosystem where you have building blocks that are far more superior than what we currently have on EVM chains. So, and if you want to just do the next DEX and the next DeFi, whatever, and we want to swim just in the source of ERC20's possibilities, then any EVM chain does an okay job, right? But the moment you want to do something with social and community and more sophisticated, you're literally out of luck very quickly.
Yeah, I also don't want to take up too much more time, but still, like for example, Lens, which is, let's say, you compare it to universal profiles, Lens is less powerful in a way, or it is still in some way centralized, and you have like you could say on a technical level, the universal profile is much more superior. But still, if there's already, let's say, 1 million users on Lens, and the apps, the functionality that works, yes, it's not maybe the perfect universal profile, but the user can get their Web3 experience done. Then
get their Web3 dose fix.
Yeah, whatever they want to do.
I needed some Web3 today.
Web3, but then in that case, still Lens would have an advantage because of the network effects and existing user base.
Yes and no. So if you look at what's currently happening on Universal Everything, I mean, I think we're already making it clear that you can do more things that you can do right now on systems on Lens. There's also less you can do, like systems on Farcaster, which is a post-message system with mini apps. But it is hard to compare, because what Lens, at least Lens 1, if you compare it to Universal Profile, it's not really comparable. From a user point of view, okay, I see a profile and I see some posts below. On Universal Everything, actually, you don't see posts because it's actually a profile where you see currently apps below. But it's not at all the same thing. Universal Profiles is a generic smart contract account that can interact with any DApp. It's actually the wallet itself that can interact with any DApp, hold information. We now build Universal Everything as a way to interact with mini apps with one click, as you saw. While Lens 1, at least, is a NFT that's your profile picture with an external wallet that you connect to it, or a private key wallet, that you have a smart contract where you can post messages, make likes. So you have like a set of 5-10 things you could do. And that's what Lens is for. It's the social system with 5 options. But Universal Profile is a generic account system. Anybody could build a web app that does the same thing on Lens. Lens could be built on Universal Profiles easily. But you could not build Universal Profiles on Lens. Maybe that makes it clear to understand. Like, no, one is like more on the lower level. The Universal Profile is a generic account. Lens could be a system that uses that. Farcaster is the same thing. So Farcaster is a specific system to post messages in a decentralized way. And then the mini apps is basically a feature within the Warpcaster app to load apps. And then that wallet, which is not even not Farcaster's wallet, is an external wallet, or again, another private key, could then interact with these mini apps. And these mini apps have some limitations. This is again different. You know, this is a generic account system with generic DApps that can interact with each other, that happen to also have profile pictures, whatever you want to add to it. So this is the tricky thing. The only real way where people will start to see this is when smart guys like you build the next cool thing. Then it will become apparent that, oh, I could never even think of doing that on Lens. You know, maybe Lens 2 as a separate chain, and maybe they have better tools now. Maybe it goes a little more in this direction. But at least for Lens 1, that's not the case. And for Farcaster, it would be limited as well, because it's not an identity account system. It's a post messaging system.
But,
So it's very different things.
Yeah, 100% agreed. Like it's the apps in the end that make use of this new technology that the user will be interested.
It's the new protocols, it's the new
if
apps.
the app is
Exactly.
on Lens, and then
people should not be mistaken by looking at what they see on Universal. I mean, what you see on Universal Everything is already pretty exciting with the mini apps, but what you see today is not even remotely reflecting what this can do. It's not even, we haven't even started uncovering this. We haven't even remotely done anything in this direction. So currently, what you see is what you can do on Ethereum, except that the wallets seem to have profile pictures and kind of a bit of a smoother user experience and gaslessness and blah, blah, blah. You know, in Ethereum, that would be already a huge wow, but we don't think this is really a big deal. This is just the basic building blocks. But the real crazy stuff starts to happen when you start making use of these new standards. Then you can build the Web3 protocols you could just not even do if you wanted to on any other chain. And it's not about LUKSO versus Ethereum. See LUKSO as this frontier to explore that new way of doing things that we hope will also benefit other EVM chains down the road. But you need to have an ecosystem that tries a new way. And LUKSO is that ecosystem. And Universal Everything is that front end. And down the road, also a front end for other, multiple chains. You know, as long as they're using profiles, or as long as the profile will be, deployed on base, or then obviously you can have these DApps also on that chain, on Universal Everything. So you can already load any kind of website into your grid underneath your profile. That already allows you to have any website you want there, right? So as long as it loads in an iframe. So it's tricky to explain, and that's why also for many years it's hard to really understand how is it different, because I see just a profile picture and Facebook did the same like 20 years ago. How is that not different? It's hard to understand, but the exploration of the standards and the tech and then the new protocols will really show that and make the difference, really.
Yeah, I absolutely get that it's different, but in a way I'm concerned about adoption, where if there's other technologies that are maybe not as advanced, but let's say, good enough for the use cases, but they have a higher networks effect or a higher user base already, that this could be, yeah, a competitive advantage that's hard to compete with. But still, I mean, I'm amazed by what you have built so far.
I mean,
and I think
it's a valid
amazing, and I
concern.
think it's the way to go. I personally think so, but I don't know about my mother or about anyone else out there in the
Yeah,
world.
and I would say to this, yeah, and you're right. I mean, but you know, if that would be true, that whatever we have, the tech stack we build everything so far in Web3, if that would be sufficient, why are we still here and nobody's using blockchain? Like, why 10 years later we ended up in the meme coin mania, and that's it? No, literally, this is like making the most useless form of a token, or let's call it like a cultural fun and game of a token, right? Like, where's the social stuff? And Farcaster is a clone of Twitter in a decentralized way. It has nothing to do with a general decentralized account system or any kind of DApps for that matter, besides posting messages and now having mini apps and messages. And it's a very one use case thing. It's posting messages like on X, right? And Lens is posting messages again. But where is that foundational tool that I can use to invent that new thing that will tie the world together in a new democratic, ontocratic way? You know, where is that building block that, you know, the regen and the DAOs and the network state people could use? It doesn't exist. It's minimal MetaMask wallet with like a DAO website at best, you know? That's the status where we are. And there were like 5 years of playing around with that, and I haven't seen much more than where we are right now still. So I do believe it needs the new foundational building blocks. It needs a new way of trying things, and with those, then we can make other things possible. So, yeah. Awesome. But you're right. It will take the time for adoption, because we need to first really make it more accessible and then educate more. And then the more people dive in, the more people start to build, the more apparent it will get. It takes sadly longer than I expected to.
You can apply the same principle to just smart contracts in general. Like a smart contract, it's a very general purpose technology for like a programmable rules enforced on the chain. But like the main, as you say, the main application that use smart contracts that have been leveraged is like what is DeFi with Uniswap that most of the users use. ENS, some DAO frameworks like Compound or Lending, but like a smart contract in itself, like just these are just a small portion of what else you can do with smart contract.
It's actually 0.0% of the possibilities that we haven't even explored yet.
And I think, the challenge here is that I really agree with Fabian, is that with the current standard, that's true that in the end, the user get the most of get a good user experience, but you have used as much as the capacity that you can use with ERC standards right now. And if you want like more, like you want to try to go more into like new areas, like for like new, more social use case and protocol, the ERC standard, as far as we see, it's a bit restrictive, and that's why like it's more like about exploring this new area. But I agree with you that at the end, you know, like there's this network effect and the competitive advantage of like all these other chain.
Yes. So much for now. Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a couple of questions. First of all, regarding adoptions, specifically parents, friends, how is LUKSO make it easier to onboard? I still probably need a seed phrase. How to solve it?
No. You want to answer this one, or? I mean,
you can already have some experience on universal everything, or to create an universal profile, and you will see that it's totally different. So, for example, you don't have to take care of private keys, for example, or you have key manager that can guarantee access on different devices. And for example, you have a gasless experience, so you don't have to go through a really hard technical process to just be on the Web3. And that's the first steps to play around. And you have already all the tools to interact and execute transaction. So you don't need to be technical at all to understand what's going on and what you are doing, basically. Then
that's the ideal scenario.
Yeah, that's the ideal scenario. But I mean, but if you compare the system with the one that we used to get along, it's totally different user experience, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a topic I'm really strongly opinionated about. The seed phrase case, it's that I think you always have different type of users. You always have like the Eli5 non-technical users, and you have also the pro advanced users, which will be very like they know what they are doing. They're gonna take the seed phrase or like the raw private key, and they're gonna import it like in their like wallet. And you could technically even do that. That will be very advanced, but you could use your private key that has access to universal profile and go on the block explorer, or like have an app that like you could literally go on the explorer and interact with your UP like that. But the problem is that like private key, it's an extremely low level technology. It's like literally public key cryptography. It's something that is a technology that is absolutely not meant for an end user. Like you cannot even imagine. There is no way that you will get blockchain technology adopted by teaching everyone on the planet how a private key works. And the thing with private key is exactly what is happening right now on universal profile, is that it's something that sits behind the scene. You have a private key that...
I think the question is, maybe you want to answer how, because you wanted to know how we do that.
So how we don't...
Because he's very aware probably that it's difficult.
So like how, the question is...
how are we doing it different?
So how do we like still have private key, but like no gas, for instance, like not pay for the gas? Or
I mean, not specifically regarding like the gasless transactions, because like I may assume you're giving a quota, or like I'm reaching some sort of like requirements to get this quota. But yeah, I'm just interested, how do you like simplify the things regarding the adoption? So something that was mentioned on the first slides.
Yeah.
So exactly the number one thing is make the private key irrelevant, ideally, right? Currently, you need the private key, and the private key is everything. Your private key is your account, you lose it, it's all over. That's why you need to write down your seed phrases, which derives your private key. When you have a smart contract account, you can now abstract the way how it's being controlled. Your private keys is one way to control it. Another smart contract could be another way. A system that uses pass keys could be another way. A time-based system, whatever. You could like invent anything as long as it can be built in a smart contract. So, and the cool thing is, if you make the private key replaceable, now you can make a universal profile in such a way that you have backup features, like you could have a social recovery, you could have an email, ZK email as a recovery, you could have whatever arbitrary way you can think of as a recovery.
I mean, your phone.
Why are we having this now here? Okay, right. Okay, let's go to watch a movie. Okay, whatever. Let's watch the Sahara. But the point is, like, it can be extracted away. So you have your core account that's unchangeable. We have a key manager, that's the logic contract that controls your account. And that determines which kind of addresses can control your account. And there can be different keys or other smart contracts. There could be social recovery smart contract, or could be, whatever, time-based system or whatever else. So, and we came up with a basic recovery. So when you create a profile, you get a basic recovery that's based on an email and a multisig. Could also use CK email, for example, down the road. There's a social recovery standard that someone needs to build an interface for. Actually, it's not that difficult. You could even have different devices like Authy or Google Cloud and like 5 different services that if combined together, they would recover your account. So then already that removes the need of the seed phrase, right? Because now it's not really anymore like the big deal. If this device is lost, you just access your profile from the other device. And then gaseous transactions make it easier. Then the most important thing is really the transaction windows should explain you what you're actually doing in an easy, human understandable way. That's something that we need to work more on. I mean, right now it's because it's generic, it's very tricky to make this simple from the get-go. You need to take a lot of time to really make this user-friendly. I mean, look at the MetaMask, 10 years into Ethereum and still nobody understands what they're confirming. There was so much time to come up with really good designed transaction windows, But yeah, we will hope to make that easier. So when you have that experience, or when you have the ability to create a profile with just like 2 clicks, not even an email, maybe not even a password, and just your passkey and a fingertip on your MacBook, for example, or on your Face ID on your phone, right? That's when you get people into Web3. Then even your grandma could do it. And a smart contract account with the right settings can allow that to be that, right? And that's what the universal profiles already are built for. So that's kind of how it becomes then simple.
All right. You've put it on like the chain level. So I think like those are the things that are usually the wallets that are trying to solve, right? Like social recovery, email.
It is a wallet. So your universal profile is a wallet.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is a wallet, but it's more than a wallet because it can hold information that makes an account, right? And it's just the same thing. Wallet, account, same thing.
You say at chain level, but I don't know what you meant by chain level, but it's not like universal profile. It's not at the protocol.
Yeah.
It's not.
Understood. So LUKSO is completely EVM compatible blockchain.
It's literally the only chain that's exactly working like Ethereum.
It's Ethereum.
It's literally Ethereum.
Okay.
There's no change.
Universal profile, it's a smart contract.
Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not built into the chain. No.
Yeah, the universal profile is not like an alternative to just
to EVM. It's just like a set of smart contracts.
It's not like a hard-coded smart contract chain or protocol.
Yeah.
No. It's just a standard deployed
it's just
on
a smart contract. Like
you can deploy it on any chain.
Yeah.
This is my other question. Why did you want to build your own chain? Why didn't you just, leverage the other chains? Why didn't you deploy your smart contracts on the other chains and, use your, thought of like growing your protocol to be like, more chain agnostic or like probably more like chain specific. So let's say we're having like more DApp oriented chains like Sonic, for instance, with its finality, or Unichain with its focus on Uniswap, and at the same time having like more the other chains that are oriented towards like social stuff. So why didn't you just want to be building like some kind of like a cross-chain protocol that's built on top of your system?
I mean, one obvious question is, without money, you can't build a lot of things. But actually, this is not the answer at all. In fact, that is obviously one important answer. But the actually real answer is, if you want to come up with a comprehensive set of new standards, try going to any chain, trying to convince anybody on the system where you already use ERC20, where already there's Uniswap using ERC20, and all the protocols that you have. And now try to convince people to, hey, look, we should use that new token standard. We should use this new account standard. We should all use universal receivers on our protocols. Like, you will have a hard time getting anybody to listen to you. It will be impossible to make such a comprehensive set of standards adopted on any existing chain. You need a new chain, because on a new chain, people are willing to try out different things. And then the other question, why not an L2? Why not in fact, it is one-to-one Ethereum, and that has 2 reasons. If you want to create, or if we want to have a digital identity, that should better sit on a very decentralized network, right? Ideally. The most decentralized proof-of-stake network that I know is Ethereum. And we use the same tech. I mean, obviously, we don't have that many validators. Currently, there's 120,000 validator keys, and it's probably like 500, 600 nodes, validator nodes that run the network, which is already pretty close to, way better than most L2s and pretty close to Solana on that level. But it's still not really decentralized. It will still get more, but because it uses Ethereum's protocol, it can be tens of thousands of validating nodes. And also we get all the benefits from Ethereum's development. So you have a very decentralized chain, or very possible decentralized chain. The moment value comes, it decentralizes more. While you have all these new standards and the whole new building blocks. And it's not built on the chain level, because modifying a chain means now you need to be a consensus developer, having a whole team that just does this alone. Now it's very difficult. That's why most of the people who build their own consensus either have security issues, or actually even sometimes then switching to becoming an L2, hoping they just get free security from Ethereum, which is also, by the way, half true. Because on an L2, the only security you have is about bridged assets that can be exited in case of malicious actors that run the state machine. But the smart contract you deploy on that L2 technically has no security at all. If the sequencer people stop, or if they collude, you're literally out of luck. And that's 10 people that can collude most of the time. So people are not aware how unsecure an L2 is. Nice for an app chain, but if we want to create this as the foundation for our new digital identity, for the most generic, crazy stuff people can invent tomorrow, it better be decentralized, and on a very decentralized tech stack. So it's the two things. For a whole new set of standards, you need a new chain. There's no other way. And it better be decentralized.
Gotcha.
And we don't have the capacity to develop a consensus. So, I mean, I contributed a lot to Ethereum, so I think I take a little back here for the rest of the world. So,
thank you.
Thanks for the questions, by the way, both of you. And yeah, and the skepticism is very understandable, and it's hard to really judge judge the cake by how it looks from the outside. I don't know. By the looks, judge a cake by the looks. I don't know. Judge by the what? And what by the cover? Judging a book by the cover. Yeah, maybe this is what it is. Looks like a profile page. Looks like a profile page is a profile page. Looks like lens is like lens. Looks like Farcaster is like Farcaster. Yeah,
I mean,
and you're right.
I'm personally, I'm fully convinced. I'm just wondering, or I'm questioning, like I'm thinking about what would it need for really widespread adoption and for really more people.
Yeah,
to
I
get into
think the moment we have the first protocols, apps, and use cases that literally make use of the new standards, which by the way, so far hasn't even happened properly, that's when you get into territory that can't be copied.
Yeah, I also
and only
totally
made
see
with this complex.
I totally see the use case for updating metadata on NFTs, for example, which is not possible on.
I think it's,
so it's
that's
like
a simple one. Or the fact that like you have a cool collection, and like then literally 2 years down the road they realize that they can still upgrade metadata, or could potentially if they wanted to, or can even extend the contract. So a new thing comes out, and all the old tokens can literally adjust to it as well. Like that's when you realize, oh my God, that was actually a better place here than on the other thing where there was nothing to change.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's once you have like the very first few. From my perspective, you don't need like a lot of application. You just need 1 or 2 applications that really understood the the capability and leverage the feature very well, and that's where it's really start to have like a rolling effect. And I think Ethereum is exactly what happened. It started. It was like the EVM, programmable computer, and there was like, I remember there was like on the Ethereum website building unstoppable application, like the whole vision, but nobody completely got it from the start. And you got like very few applications who really completely boomed everything.
And the funny thing is then ERC20 niche it into the token direction, and we stayed there. We literally stayed there until now. I mean, sure, we had ICOs and we had DeFi and lending indexes, and a little bit of tries on DAOs and social, but it's a micro niche compared to the monster of token economy, right?
Well, you had DeFi, like the first big DeFi protocol.
But it came all out of one standard.
Yeah.
And the funny thing, if you really think about it, all the innovation we see on Web3 is literally consisting out of 3 functions or 4. Your balance of function, your transfer function, your approve authorized operator or approve operator, and your transfer from function. Yeah. That's literally the whole innovation of crypto since 10 years is those 4 functions.
Yeah.
So we have
made $1 billion market.
No, but yeah,
it's a quite
You go to OpenSea, to the developer doc, you go look at how you create a liquidity pool, you look at how you can put like some money in like a lending protocol. It is always it's always the same. It's like approve, transfer from, and it was really like, I mean, me the way I saw it, it was like really the first few D apps that built them from scratch. Like for big one for me were like ENS, like who understood like, okay, we cannot deal with addresses. It's more
That was a novel thing. The idea of like a name,
like a name registry. It was very related to like to the internet, like not having to deal with IP address but domain name, and the concept, people understood the concept. And then you had Uniswap with like with DeFi, which Uniswap is really a protocol who was built from the ground up, and then like it kind of kickstarted. And I think it's the same on LUKSO. In fact, there is a very good NFT collection on LUKSO called Burn Pix, who really understood how to leverage a portion of a feature of a standard. They use the metadata to put like all the data for like a fractal image, and it looks super cool. He saw it. I don't know if you remember on the slide. There was like some. This is one example of how you can leverage the feature. But yeah, you need like really 1 to the app, and people who are like, you need few developers who are having like the aha moment. You're like, oh, okay, that's a whole toolbox. What can I do with it? And then they figure out some pretty cool stuff to build. And then you have a user who look at what people have built, like the DGen or like the normal user, and like, oh, that's actually very cool. I'm gonna try it out. And people like spread the words really. I mean, that's my perspective.
I mean, also from if you have been longer around. So we have built we initiated a network. We launched a universal profile browser extension. Now we launched a mobile app. Now we have universal everything in a way to create or to basically just have mini apps underneath your profile. And the next step will really be make this more discoverable, make profiles more accessible, make the tooling better, make things safer, make it easier to understand, make it very easy to create a profile with having no extension or mobile app, just in your browser. And those are the kind of key building blocks. And once they are there, it's literally a self-runner from then on. It's about people discovering and learning. And then education around the tools and the standards is the most important thing. From then on, it's really about like honing into the detail of the standards. Because like I said, it's 4 standards that made the whole space. 4 functions. We have probably like a 50 plus, or even like that all really make very useful stuff. So the exponential possibility range just exponentially increased by a lot.
It's really funny because even me working on, I even realize as we speak that the technology we are using for building the bridge, Hyperlane, it's the same thing. It's like a collateral contract that you approve to spend your token, and then you call the collateral contract to transfer from your
transfer your token on your behalf.
It's exactly like everything on the Ethereum.
It's just like such a simple logic, and it makes so much possible.
And transfer, everything is around this. So that means
I mean, like I said back in the day, we haven't even discovered 0.1% of like the possibilities of Ethereum, and we have still not even. Now we are at 0.2%. You know, we haven't even started uncovering what Web3 is going to do, right? But without the right foundational building blocks that are made for generality and built to work together in a proper way, I don't think we wouldn't even get there. I mean, 10 years later, I guess maybe that's the proof, the 10 years. That 10 years and we're not beyond tokens, I guess maybe something is problematic here. And maybe it might be the token itself, you know?
And I mean, you can see on Ethereum, like, you know, like with like all the, like the limitation of like many standards, but to build like a full-on solution is like someone create another standard, or then you integrate another standard and or like another product. It's so many, you know, like product and APIs plugged together to do something, but it's very hard to, you know, like it's very hard to conceptualize how the whole thing is working together. It looks like you have put like a lot of tiny bricks to make a big wall.
Yeah, and then
like a full-on solution, which I mean, yeah, as you say, like the user is kind of like satisfied, but it doesn't like really translate the whole full-on experience that you can have. And then if you want to extend, that's the thing. Also, it's very rigid. What I've noticed is that you have a solution design, or a product design with all these standard, but then if you want to plug things on top of it, it's super hard. You have to get into another third-party vendor, or like, you know, like that handle the passkeys, or like that handle like a social login, and it's really hard to just extend the architecture of your product from the ground up, because the product that you are building with the standard is rigid from the start, and that's also the reason why the token standard by design are already thought through to be like open enough that you can easily extend them.
I mean, like maybe also much of this seems a little, I mean, just talking to the blue, because there's not like you guys haven't dived deep into the docs yet, but and also maybe one thing is like these standards, like we have done a lot, we invented a lot. It's literally a little Bible, if you will, but it's actually not as complicated as it might have sound even in the presentation. And also there's a lot of knowledge you don't even need to have. For example, if you want to port any protocol from Ethereum to LUKSO, you can just take that smart contract, deploy it on LUKSO, create a profile in the browser extension, connect your browser extension the same like you do MetaMask to your D app, and your stuff works. Out of the box. Your universal profile can interact with any smart contract the same like your EOA can. On chain, it will look a little different, but the message sender will be the profile address. And there's a little bit stuff before, you know, function checks and key manager checks and other stuff. But you don't need to even know how any of this stuff works. The benefit you have now is the address that is in your D app connected, actually you can read the profile data from. You get a picture out of the box from the user and a name and website links and God knows what else he has stored there. You can even ask the user to store information at his account, and then next time he comes back, read it out if you need to. It just like really extends things a lot, but I guess there was a lot of information too. So for today, maybe we cut it here. I hope you learned a lot. I hope it was interesting, and thank you, Federico, for presenting. Cool. Yeah, so we have more pizza if you're still hungry, and drinks. Yeah, and there's even a whole waterfront down there, actually, and a rooftop too.